So you're not having to talk too much, but you're doing stuff together, or going to a Gold Eyes game or a Bombers or a Jets game, that kind of shared activity. So again, you kind of have the superficial talk, but now you might go to the next level of communication and you might talk about what's on the news, what's happening in Manitoba, a little bit about your job, that kind of thing. But it wouldn't go much deeper than that. You keep it safe. You keep it stuff that isn't going to make them uncomfortable or yourself uncomfortable. And then you're still basically only going to be happy all the time. That's your emotion that you are going to allow. Now, let me just say a couple things about that. What will happen is you'll get to know these acquaintances a little bit, and you will have some that you would say, I think maybe a deeper friendship might be a good idea. But then you'll go, I just can't take on any other friends right now. My life is too full. I just can't handle another friend. So they're just going to have to stay at an acquaintance. That doesn't mean they're unhealthy. That doesn't mean you don't like them. That just means your plate is full. Now, that's where people from complex trauma have problems. Because if that person says, hey, do you want to do something? And you're afraid to say no, then all of a sudden you go out with them and then you got too much on your plate. You get stressed out. You get a resentment towards that person. All of those things, you start avoiding them and you don't answer their phone calls and you get yourself in a mess. So up front, what I want you to understand is when you see somebody as an acquaintance and either you want them or they want you to be a casual friend, you need to first look at your life and say, do I have the time and energy for a casual friend? Because it takes more time than an acquaintance. Then the next thing that might happen is you will find somebody and you think this might be a great casual friend, and you ask them to go out and do something and they say yes, and you start to try and talk to them at a little deeper level, and what you find is you keep running into nothing but masks and nothing but a wall. They don't have the ability to be real. They are just totally disconnected from themselves. They are all about fake intimacy and wearing masks. You can put a lot of energy into trying to build a friendship, but probably it's wasted energy. So what you then need to understand is, first, do I have the time and the energy for another friend at this level? Secondly, do they meet certain criteria that would bring them to this level? So are they healthy enough to be a more casual friend? And what criteria would you use? And so we're going to come back to this all the time tonight, because I've asked people all the time, what's the criteria to use that you use to go from an acquaintance to a casual friend? And they go, I never thought about that. They're good looking, and we seem to have stuff in common. I go, that's okay to start, but you're going to need a lot better criteria if you're going to not get burned. If you're not going to end up with somebody that turns out to be a total dud and you just wonder, how do I get rid of them? Okay, so that's casual friend. Next is a close friend. So we're coming down, a close friend, somebody you let into your life in a deeper way. Communication-wise, you start to open up about pretty much anything. You start to risk revealing what you think about things, so you give your opinion about very personal things. You start to risk showing other emotions besides happiness. You might even get irritated with them. You might be a bit sad one day and you let them see your sadness. And that's scary, because your fear is If I'm not happy all the time, they're going to say I'm a bad friend and not want me. But at a close friend, you are starting to take the risks of opening up, of becoming real, of letting them get to know the parts of you that you've kept hidden from others. And so this is a very scary thing. Now, here's what I want you to understand and think about as we go through this. What kind of friend do you need in recovery? Most people, if they only have acquaintances and casual friends in recovery, they don't make it. You need somebody, not necessarily right away, but somebody that you can begin to be open and honest with about everything. If you don't have that, it's very easy to begin to keep secrets, to not be totally honest with yourself, and you might start into old behaviors and not even realize it, where a close friend would catch you and call you on it. And so a close friend becomes an important part of just what we need to be honest and to keep growing and to begin to get to know ourselves and to take the risk of changing and doing things and relationships differently. So that is a very important step for a lot of people. So what criteria will you use when you go out with a casual friend and you say, wow, I really like this person. Maybe I'm going to let them into my life as a close friend. What are the criteria that would make them a good close friend? That is very important to think about. And then, out of those close friends, you might have one or two that you say, you know what? They're going to become my BFF. They're going to become my soulmate, my closest friend. I want this person, and this isn't necessarily a romantic relationship, but it's saying I want this person in my life to know everything about me. So there is no secrets, nothing like that at all. Next one, Britt. So the soulmate becomes, for most people, their partner eventually. Now, the sad thing that I've noticed from complex trauma is a lot of people think they have a soulmate in the early days because they feel close. But they don't really open up. They don't deal with things that come up in the relationship. And pretty soon they start drifting further apart. And so it seems that once they get a partner, they moved in together, they become less and less soulmates all the time. And that's sad, and that's not what we want to happen. But many people don't know how to change that outcome, and that's part of what we want to do in this series. So let me give you a criteria to think about. What we're looking at is intimacy. So if you think of intimacy, we can think of physical intimacy, that's sex, that's letting a person hug me, that kind of thing. Then we have intellectual intimacy, and that is we like the same topics. We like talking about the same things and learning about the same things. Thirdly, we have emotional intimacy. We can share our emotions. We can cry together. We can just be very raw in each other's presence and really connect at an emotional level. And then fourthly is spiritual intimacy. And that doesn't mean religion, though it might include that. What spiritual intimacy means that at my deepest beliefs, my deepest passions, my deepest values, we're on the same page. That to me is the main or the number one criteria that should be in your mind in considering whether a person should go from a casual friend to a close friend and from a close friend to a soulmate. Because if you have somebody that you think is a soulmate and you're not on the same page as to what you believe and value and your passions and the direction you're going in your life, you're soon going to find that what you thought you had in common, football or hockey, isn't enough anymore because your hearts don't beat together. And so that becomes, in my mind, the true criteria of true soulmates is that you have that level of spiritual intimacy. So another way to look at it is when you're on the same page with somebody, you have the same values and beliefs and passions, then you can take away all your masks. You can take away the walls that have protected you. You can begin to feel safe. And part of spiritual intimacy is this person, like you, wants to get healthy. They want to deal with unhealthy stuff. That's the direction they're going in their life. They want to be real, they want to grow, and they want to get healthy. So that is where we're heading. So you get 4 levels, and most of us who are a really healthy person might have 2 soulmates, their partner and a very, very close friend. Then they might have a half dozen very close friends, many casual friends, hundreds of acquaintances. That is the level that you go. So here's what I want you to understand. It started as an acquaintance. Everybody starts as an acquaintance. Out of that, you're going to pick some that you think you might have something common, and then they become a casual friend. Out of that, you're going to begin to put certain criteria in place, and from them, you're going to pick some to become a close friend, and then from that, a soulmate. How long do you think it takes to go from an acquaintance to a soulmate? I always ask addicts this. Britt, go to the next one. I'm going to let you just chew on that for a little bit. Okay. You're catching on. I didn't even have to give you the answer. So here's what I see is the challenge of complex trauma. Complex trauma, a child's brain operates out of the emotional center. An adult's brain operates out of the thinking center. Complex trauma keeps you operating out of the emotional center. It keeps you operating out of the child part of your brain. So what is the main criteria for a child in making a decision? Emotions. How does it make me feel? Or how am I feeling right now? Then based on how I'm feeling, I will do this. So what happens in complex trauma? I meet somebody. I go, there's chemistry here. It creates a feeling that is very intense. And you go, oh, I'm in love. Let's move in together. Remind me of what your name is again. So we go in our minds from an acquaintance to a soulmate in one night. Then what happens? A couple months pass and you go, who is this jerk? Why did I invite him into my life? And you go, oh, I think I might have made a mistake. Now, here's the problem, though. You go, this guy's the jerk. I'll just go out and find the next perfect person and repeat the pattern. And then 2 months later, they're a jerk too. And instead of realizing maybe I got some problems and I'm going about this the wrong way, I keep repeating the pattern, wondering why I end up with an endless list of jerks in my life. So the reality is, I have to learn some patience here to slow myself down. Now, I get this all the time because I talk about this all the time with clients. So I get clients who come to me and say, I've met somebody, but we're going to go slow. And I smile, and I go, okay, good. guess what their definition of slow is? 2 weeks now instead of 1 day. So guess how long it takes to go for an average healthy person from an acquaintance to a soulmate? 6 months to a year of getting to know this person. Are they honest? Are they a person that is reliable? Are they a person that treats others with respect? Because if there's any of that stuff, this relationship's not going to work. So let's get out of it before we have trouble. But what happens to a complex trauma? Hi, nice to know you. Let's move in together. What's your name? And then they're a jerk. Instead of saying, you're out of here, you go, all they need is somebody to love them, and I'm sure I can fix them. Or I'll just control them, and I'll become this jealous freak and not let them see anybody or act crazy, and I'm going to make them into a healthy person. Doesn't work, but you try and try again. So here's the sad part of complex trauma. If you remember, as we went through the 60 characteristics, complex trauma makes a healthy relationship impossible. So the very methods or tactics I needed to survive complex trauma, don't trust anybody, be negative and critical, all of those things that I had to do to survive, they make a healthy relationship impossible. And so what happens if you haven't dealt with your complex trauma and you get into a relationship, you won't trust. Your jealousy and insecurities and shame, all of that will begin to cause you to respond in ways of disrespect, ways of questioning them, jumping to worst case scenarios, and before you know it, you got conflict after conflict, but you don't like conflict, so you avoid conflict, and you just pile up more and more things that aren't dealt with, and it's a disaster waiting to happen. So number one thing when we come to a relationship is you got to do 3 things. Number one, I can't have a closer relationship unless I have the time and the energy. So here's what I do in my life. I picture a Lego block. So picture a Lego block that's got those 6 little knobs on the top. I know in my life that I have the capacity for 6 close relationships. And right now my Lego block is full. So if somebody comes and they want to become my best buddy, I go, you can remain a casual friend. That doesn't mean you're unhealthy. That doesn't mean I don't like you. It just means my Lego block is full right now. And if I were to try to add you, I'd have to take somebody off. And my wife would not be happy. Because it would probably be her that got stuck on a back burner. And I don't want to live with that. Or one of my kids would feel that they didn't matter as much to me. So you're going to have to stay a casual friend. So that's number one. Number 2, you have to become a person with a criteria of what makes for a healthy friend and a healthy relationship. Because if you just go by, they're good looking, we both like sports, and they're good in bed, that will not keep a relationship healthy and growing. So what keeps a relationship healthy and growing? People, and here's the word, people of character. People who are honest. People who are open. People who are safe. So I have to figure out the criteria. And we're going to do a whole night on that in this series. And third, we have to become patient people. Now, what that means is you meet somebody and there's chemistry and your brain wants to operate out of the emotional center, you have to say, whoa, horsey. We got to put some brakes on here, not just for a week or 2, but we have to make sure we get to know this person. So here's what I tell people. What are you going to do in your life to make sure the brakes stay on? I go, are you going to text every day? Oh, yeah, we're going to text every day, all day. I go, well, that's not putting brakes on. Are you going to see each other every day? Oh, yeah, of course, we're going to go out every day together. That's feeding the emotional part of your brain. You have to figure out a boundary for yourself that enables you to keep the thinking part of your brain as the boss and to keep you moving slowly, checking out criteria rather than going on emotions. So think of it this way. How many times have you followed your emotions and it turned out to be a healthy relationship? Probably zero. If you didn't have a criteria of character in place. So the point for tonight is the only way we're going to have a healthy relationship is if we start doing relationships differently. If not, if we keep doing what we've always been doing, we're going to keep getting what we always been getting. So that's part one. What I thought I'd do tonight, just to get us going, it's part of the relationship series, but it goes much broader than that, is I want you to just think with me about the very first thing that Jesus ever taught, that we have a record of. His very first sermon. And it's what we call the Sermon on the Mount. It's found in Matthew 5, and it's how Jesus began his ministry. And what you find in that is that Jesus lays out the foundation stones for a healthy life. Foundation stones for a healthy relationship. Foundation stones for how to be happy. So many have called it his 8-part recipe for happiness. And it is a beautiful thing once you begin to understand it. Now, you need to understand some cultural things, which I will explain tonight. But let me just read it to you. It says, now when Jesus saw the crowds, so he's gone up a hill, all these people have gathered around. It says he went on a mountainside and he sat down. And when a person who is a teacher sat down, that meant he was ready to give something that was of great significance. So usually in our culture, a preacher stands up when he wants to make a point. In that culture, you sat down. His disciples came to him, and he began to teach them. So blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn. So the key word is blessed or blessed, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. And blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. That word blessed is a technical word that meant totally satisfied. So it's not just superficial happy, it's deep down contentment, satisfaction. It was a word that was used to describe God. So God's mood is God is the most satisfied, content, happy being in the world. That might go against some of your picture of God as being kind of angry and mad all the time. But what we find is God is this very happy being. And what he is doing here in this thing is saying, I want you guys to be happy too. Have you ever thought of why in the world do we have children when we know that they're going to be a great headache at times and they can cause more pain in our life than anything else? Here's how I would explain it. I get married, it's a really great thing, and I go, we got so much joy together, let's share it by bringing a new life into the world. So why in the world did God create us who had caused him so much pain? Because he had so much joy, he wanted to share it with us. And so that's what he wants. So these are ingredients to a satisfying life. And that includes to healthy relationships. So what you need to understand is that they are 4 internal attitudes. So a lot of people come to me and say, tell me what to do. And I say, I can tell you what to do all I want, but if you don't change your internal attitudes, you won't do what I tell you to do for very long or very effectively. So what God realized is if you have the right attitude, the right actions naturally follow. If you don't have the right attitude, you can tell people what they should do all day, but they won't be able to do it very well. So attitudes, internal attitudes, are the core of what makes us healthy. Now that's significant because complex trauma said the reason I'm not healthy is out there. My circumstances aren't right. If I only had nicer people in my life, if I only had more money, a better job, a better boss, then I'd be happy. Jesus says, no. Unless you get straightened out on the inside, you'll never be happy. So that's where we have to start. These attitudes, they begin with a one-time decision that I'm going to do this and become this, but then it becomes an ongoing, repeated process every day of my life. Now, what is interesting, it said, happy are the poor, happy are those who cry, happy are the meek. And you go, that sounds like a recipe for misery. How is that a recipe for happiness? So these are paradoxes. And they go to something the world really doesn't quite understand. And it goes to something very deep inside of us. And so they start out like paradoxes, but as we follow them, we find out that they do result in a healthy life, a satisfying life, and we can experience pain, we can experience sadness, but underneath that, there's a contentment. And that's what we're talking about in all of this. And this will give us the ability to become healthy enough to have a healthy relationship. Now, one of the interesting connections of the Beatitudes is this. They almost parallel perfectly the 12 steps of AA. And you're going to see that as we go. And what is interesting is that the original writers of the 12 steps actually used the Beatitudes to help them in creating the 12 steps. And so I'm going to try to make some connections as we go. But let's begin. Recipe ingredient number 1, to be happy, I have to be poor in spirit. Now notice, that doesn't mean poor as in no money. It's poor in spirit, poor internally. Now to understand it, there are 3 words. So the New Testament of the Bible, where this is written, was written in the Greek language. So there are 3 words for poor in Greek. And we have one word for poor, but we understand different nuances automatically. So number 1, we say a person is poor if they can barely pay their bills. Like they get through a month and they don't have a penny left over. We go, they're really living on a tight budget. They're poor. That's not the word used here. Second word is they can hardly pay their bills, but they are so poor they can't buy vegetables and meat. They live on a Kraft dinner diet. That takes it to a new level of poor. That's not the word used here. The third word is they're so poor they got to declare bankruptcy. They can't even buy food. They can't pay a bill. They are bankrupt. That's the word used here. So what is Jesus saying? If I am going to get healthy and happy, it begins by me saying the problem is in me. I'm bankrupt. I can't make it work. I can't stop my dark side all by myself. I can make great plans that I'm going to be loving tomorrow, and then my selfish side shows up and I blow it. I can make great plans to keep my anger in check and not lash out, and I don't. I end up lashing out. Something in me is broken. Something in me is broken, and I'm bankrupt to fix it. And so I need help from outside of me. Does that sound like step 1? We admitted that we were powerless over drugs and alcohol and our life had become unmanageable, step two, we needed help from outside ourselves. And that is what Jesus is saying. But he's not just saying about addiction. It is saying in all of my life, I can't be a healthy husband. I can't be a healthy father. I can't be a healthy leader. I can't be healthy if I was just relying on myself totally because something's broken in me. I need help. So the second part is blessed are they that mourn. And what that means is I am sorry for the mess I've made. It's not just that I feel remorse, though that's part of it. It's I'm the problem. And I am repenting for me acting out and hurting myself and others and God. I don't want to live this way anymore. So what happens with a lot of people is they go, I am so sorry for what I've done. Please take away the negative consequences, but I don't really want to change. What mourning means is I am sorry for what I've done and I want to change. I don't want to live this way anymore. That's true mourning. Does that sound like step 1, 2, 3? That I have to start looking at me and changing. That takes us to number 3. Blessed are the meek. Now, if you grew up in certain cultures, you would have heard meek means weak, right? And that's how we've kind of pictured a meek person is a weak person. So let me explain it. In that culture, the horse that won the race was called the meekest horse. And you go, that's weird because it's the strongest horse that wins the race. So how would they be the meekest? Do you realize it's not the strongest horse necessarily that wins the race? Because you could have a strong horse that's running off in all kinds of different directions. It's the strongest horse that surrenders their will to this tiny little jockey and says, you be the boss. I'll do what you want. That's the horse that wins the race. So what does meekness mean? I surrender to a power greater than myself. I say, as long as I'm the boss, it's going to be a disaster. So I got to take all my power, all of the stuff inside of me, and say, God, you take over. Because I can't manage myself. I need a new boss. So in that culture, they looked at medicine or drugs, and they said you could have drugs which are very powerful that can do a whole lot of damage, and all of you relate to that, or you could have drugs that were under the control of a doctor, and then they do a lot of good. You could have a wind, and a wind out of control can be a hurricane that destroys thousands and thousands of dollars, or you can have a wind under control and it's a soothing breeze. And so what is he saying? The only way to get a healthy life and a happy life is you have to become meek, where you say, I surrender my will to a power greater than me, who is smarter than me, and I will trust his wisdom. Now, a lot of us are like a horse that has a jockey, and he says, he pulls the reins to turn this way, and we go, are you sure you know what you're talking about? And we have a little debate with the jockey because we think maybe we're smarter and maybe we can't trust this jockey. And so growth is, I trust him more and more gradually. But it starts by a one-time decision where I go, I choose to trust, and I know I'm going to want to take my will back every day, and I know I'm going to have trouble trusting you every day, but I want to keep growing to trust you more and to surrender more and more. Next one. Blessed are they who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Hunger and thirst is a very interesting word that was used. So you got to picture this. I love blueberries, okay? So if I'm hungering for blueberries, you would think I just want one little carton of blueberries, and that will satisfy my hunger. But I know the word for hunger and thirst there is? I want every blueberry in the world. So what it is saying is I want to hunger for what? Righteousness means I want to be healthy. More than I want anything else in the world, that's my number one desire. I want God and to become like God, which means being healthy. It's a consuming thirst. It's my number one. Now, here's what a lot of people do. God, I'm in trouble. I'm really sorry. Please take over. Okay, the crisis is past. Thank you. You can go away on vacation. I'll call you when you're needed for the next crisis. Step 4 says, I'm going to do a moral inventory. Why? Because I want to change. Step 6 and 7, I want to deal with my moral defects and become healthy. Step 4, 5, 6, and 7 are exactly what this is talking about. I want to hunger and thirst. I want to get healthy. And that I don't just want when I'm in a crisis. I want that every day. I want that to become the characteristic of my life. So I don't just reach out to God and surrender when I'm going through a rough patch. I want that to become the daily characteristic of my life. So that is the first 4 Beatitudes. And then the next 4, they go into being merciful, being peacemakers, people that begin to have healthy relationships. But it starts with getting the God piece right before I can get the people piece right. And so he is saying you start with an internal attitude, but that internal attitude has a spiritual dimension, and it recognizes I can't make this journey without God's help and without surrendering to him and without wanting him more than anything else. Let's just pray. Father, we all need on a daily basis to keep these 4 attitudes in our life, to keep learning them, deepening in them. And if we're slipped away from that in our life right now, just bring us back to that place of that desperate need and surrender and desire for you.